This is obviously the bridge. We're on the bridge. In 1744, there was a physician, a doctor, going through on his way to Donegal, and he made a note of what he passed when he was going through Butler's Bridge. He said it was a bridge of 5 stone arches over a branch of Lough Erne, and here he said a corn, a scutching, and a paper mill were all set a-going under one roof and by one wheel. Now we know what the mill was. The mill was over here at what's the name again? At Armstrong's. Now in 1816, a lot of the development of roads were all down to the post office, and there was a well, we'll talk about it in a while. There was a mail coach service went through here twice a day, and it became more popular around 1816, 1820. And in the House of Commons report of 1816, we came across a reference where the Treasury had advanced the sum of £1,551 for the building of a stone bridge at Butler's Bridge, in lieu of Butler's Bridge, for the mail coach road to Enniskillen. Now, if there was a bridge here previously of 5 strong arches only less than 80 years earlier, I don't know why they needed a new bridge only 80 years later, but it must have been narrower, or it must have been wide enough, or it mustn't have been strong enough to withstand the new coaches that were going. But anyway, whatever way it worked out, this bridge is here since between 1816 and 1820. Now across the river here, across over the bank, over the bridge, there was an eel rear, and that was a great source of income for eels, were a great source of income for landlords, and I suspect again it was owned by John Riley. And in the building of the bridge in 1820, one of the engineers found a stone axe head. It was called a grey wax stone axe head, and it's actually in the National Museum in Dublin. Dr. Halpin was the man that I was talking to, and Andy Halpin, and he timed it being 4,500 up to 4,500, from 1500 to 4,500 BC. So there were people knocking around here for millennium in prehistoric times. So that's the bridge itself now. So if you don't mind, we go over to where the pump house is now, or where the pump was. Yeah, I had just made a note. I had just made a note here and I forgot to read it. We had a local poet in the village called John Foynes, who was a lovely man, and he wrote a lovely poem about the mill. And he said here, just a verse out of it, he said, "The rear wall itself tells the tale of the past, although in decay it may be. Once it turned the stream to industry's wheel by the banks of the old Annalee." So that was a lovely little verse by our local John Foynes. There's 2 things here, there were 2 battles here in Butler's Bridge, 2 real live battles, one that we're sure of and one that we're not sure of. The one that we're not sure of is the one that's referred to in 1641. A poem was published in the Anglo-Saxon in 1848, and it referred to the Battle of Tullybuck. Now Tullybuck starts from Brendan Farrell's house up the street, and so I don't know if it's, we're just not sure about where the location of it was. At that time, there's an awful lot of sectarianism in the area. There was reprisals between Catholics and Protestants. It was a vicious time, and this poem refers to bullets flying and artillery roaring, and there's a reference here at the back of here. It said here that with lifeblood, it said, with lifeblood on that day the river ran red, and this is in the poem. With lifeblood on that day the river ran red, whilst heap was the field with the wounded and dead. And it was all to do with the, I know it sounds very small place, all to do with, there was a lot of battles going on in Ireland between Charles I and James II, or Charles II and James II, over the sovereignty in England. There was a contest between the Protestants and Catholics as to who would be sovereigns in England, and that spilled over into Ireland. It's a long story, the Battle of the Boyne and the whole lot of us all into one. But there was a skirmish here with apparently a lot of people dead because of it. And there was a later battle in 1689 that we definitely know about. The Williamites held Belturbet and the Protestants, in other words, and the Catholics held Cavan under James. And they tried to come from Belturbet to Cavan to have an early dawn raid on Cavan town. And it's actually written about. And there was over 209, there was 900, there was nearly 1,000 soldiers from Belturbet came on this surprise to Cavan town, and they were held up here at the bridge. And the guy on the bridge side, there was 40 defenders on this bridge under a Captain Brian Kelly was his name. And it described the bridge under these 40 as being strongly fortified. It was hardly strongly fortified against 1,000 men coming from Belturbet. But anyway, the effect of it was that it delayed the battle, the attacking Cavan by several hours. But they got into Cavan anyway and burned all the houses, but they didn't get the castle up in the Cockpit, which was the reason they wanted to get into Cavan. But it's recorded that in the battle there were 17 prisoners of the 40 defenders. There were 17 prisoners were taken as prisoners. 9 were killed, and the rest escaped. So it was a fairly bloody place. And what they said, what they did was they crossed the river, up the river, and they came in behind the forces that were guarding the bridge. So I don't know where they went in, maybe they went in up the point. So anyway, those 2 battles, one we're sure of, that's recorded. We have a letter from the Colonel Wolsey, who was in control of Belturbet. And so for the 1689 battle, that's a definite fact. He wrote an account of it back to London. But the 1641 one, we're relying on a poem. Paddy Letty's book, Mrs. MacDonald, who was a very good memory and a lovely lady, sadly long passed away now, but she wrote in Paddy Letty's book about the river here that Owen Roe O'Neill, when he was that he was carried down the river here. I'll read out what she said. She said Owen Roe O'Neill was carried along the Annalee in a stretcher. This is in a stretcher made of clothes and straw by men in relays on his way to Clough Castle. He had become ill on reaching Ballyhaise Castle, coming from Tyrone, where he had been at a ball the night before. It was said that poison was put in his dancing shoes. And that was a common way of poisoning people, not in your dancing shoes, but in your shoes at that time. But according to her, he was carried along the Annalee in a stretcher on his way to Clough Castle, where he later died. So we'll try and safely go across the road to the pump here, the village pump. Can't forget that. Most towns and villages had a local pump. In Cavan town there was 3 or 4 pumps. I mean, any town of any major population would have 3 or 4. And that pump was closed in the 1930s on the advice of Dr. John Sullivan from Cavan, who was a public health doctor. But some people say that the proximity to the river, that the water was never too good in it anyway, but I wouldn't know that. And a lot of people used to water their horses and wash their clothes, and there were several entrances to the river bank from at the backs of the houses on the river street. There was no water to the houses or toilets or anything like that time. So it was a very good convenience to have. So we'll just go across there to look at